You've just been diagnosed with having a gluten intolerance. Maybe it's as serious as celiac disease. In any case, you're no longer eating gluten. This is new. Gluten's in lots of things, from pizza to pasta to cookies to sauces and condiments. It can be stressful learning this new process. Take it one step at a time. I'm Jamie with SavorySaver. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to help make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. And today, I'm going to show you some beginner tips for how to start being gluten-free. So let's get started. Let's get a quick understanding of what gluten is before we go over these tips. Gluten is a general term for the proteins found in many varieties of wheat. When those proteins come in contact with a liquid, such as water, or warm milk, or whatever, they begin to almost glue together, and they form long chains. And those chains help give your food structure, and they're called gluten. So now that we have a basic understanding of what gluten is, how are we going to eliminate it from our diet? Here are some easy tips that you can start today that will break some of that stressing out that you're probably doing if you were like my wife and I when she went gluten-free a few years ago. Tip number 1, learn what grains do and do not contain gluten. Now, I said a second ago that gluten is the proteins found in varieties of wheat. So think of your wheat flour, white flour. Those are easy. But think of things like rye. Rye has gluten. Farina has gluten. Farro has gluten. Spelt has gluten. Those are some that you may not know about. Let's think about grains that you can have. You can have quinoa. It's high in protein. It's gluten-free. You can have rice. Now, I've got instant rice here. I use the regular stuff and I use instant rice. Depends on what I'm making. You can have rice. It's a grain that you can actually have. Most rice is safe. Some other grains that are safe: corn, buckwheat, millet, teff. Those are all safe grains that you can have. Now, I'll link below to my website and the post that corresponds with this video, and you can actually read those over, make a copy of it if you need to, so you can start learning those. Tip number 2, eat foods that are naturally gluten-free. Fresh chicken, fresh pork, fresh beef, fish, all gluten-free protein sources. It's when we start adding stuff that they're not. Fresh fruits and vegetables, cheeses, dairy products like milk, eggs, all of those things are naturally gluten-free. You just need to make sure that they've not had stuff added to them. Tip number 3, learn how to read labels and become a label reader if you're not already. Gluten-free products are labeled gluten-free lots of times, but other times they're not. You need to get in the habit of reading labels every time you pick up something at the grocery store. I know it's going to take you a few more minutes to get out of the store, but it's important to do. Some products are listed gluten-free, other products are not. Sometimes a product clearly says gluten-free, and other times you have to read the box because it may be something that you can have because you're only gluten intolerant, but it doesn't specifically say that it's gluten-free. So I've got an example here of some boxes of rice. Now I have natural brown rice by Uncle Ben's, and then over here I have long grain and wild rice. Now this box, there's no gluten in it. All it is rice. The ingredients are long grain, parboiled brown rice. No gluten. Safe to have. Now, this box. Well, one of the clues is it has 23 herbs and seasonings in it. So that tells me I need to double check the ingredients and see what I can have. And going through the ingredients, the first ingredient is rice. But about 4 or 5 ingredients in, there's wheat protein. Well, wheat, to me, that's gluten. So this is a no-go. Now, what happens is in my house, my wife's gluten-free, I'm not. So we choose to have a mixed household. I make sure if I'm cooking that it's gluten-free for her, but if there's something I want, I can have it because she's not celiac and we don't risk the same kind of contamination. But you really need to read every time. Another thing that we just ran into is we went and picked up beef broth at the grocery store the other day. It was store brand, and I picked up the low sodium and started reading. Guess what? It had wheat in it. We actually had to buy the full sodium version in the same brand because it was safe and the other one was not. So even something like beef broth or chicken broth, you need to read the box. Get in the habit of doing it, read it every time. You don't know when that company is going to change their recipe and something that was initially gluten-free and didn't bother you now has some kind of additive in it. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4, be open to trying multiple gluten-free products until you find something you like. Now, pizza is a big item for my wife. She loved her pizza before going gluten-free. And that is one thing that we still haven't found something exact. The gluten just makes crust better. So you're gonna have to find a good substitute. And the only way to do that is to try and try and try until you find one that you like. Go on those Facebook groups, see what other people are talking about, but make your own decision. Someone may like the bruschetta version. That's the one my wife likes. You may not like that one. You have to just try multiple things. So when you see something on sale that you haven't tried that's safe for you, go ahead and get it and try it. If you like it, keep buying it. If you don't, be okay with it and move on. There are plenty of choices for you once you start looking. So be open to trying multiple varieties to find what you like. Tip number 5, gluten-free flour. Now, wheat flour is just one of those things that we use for everything. Gluten-free flours just don't work the same. Lots of times it takes 2 or more flours to get something similar to what wheat flour does. When you're starting off, you may want to look for a gluten-free flour blend that has everything measured together to get that consistency of wheat flour. Or you may want to look at buying almond flour, rice flour, garbanzo bean flour. You may want to look at separate ones. Find what works for you. If you're online, there are multiple sites that you can learn about gluten-free flours. I actually have a link that I can link down below to the separate flours and how they work. I sometimes use separate flours. Sometimes I use a flour blend that's already made. Sometimes I make my own blend. They're all different. So this is a King Arthur gluten-free blend. It has multiple flours in it: rice flour, brown rice flour, sorghum flour, tapioca starch, potato starch, xanthan gum. It's all in here. It's ready to go. You may not like that blend. Your recipes may not come out good with that. If it doesn't, find another. Pillsbury. Theirs, if I recall, rice flour, potato starch, pea fiber. Different blend than this. Still an all-purpose gluten-free flour. They all work differently. They all have different results. So find one that you like. I try multiple ones. If something doesn't work with one, make it with another. You really have to learn your flours. One that I see online that I think gets a bad rap sometimes is Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1. I like Bob's Red Mill. I've not had issues with it. It's pretty close to what I do when I make something. I've had good results with it. But if you don't, find something else. Just like those products you have to try until you find what you like, you have to do the same with flour blends. None of them work for you? Find a way to make your own blend. There are plenty of recipes out there to make your own blend. Tip number 6. Find a gluten-free cookbook. Find one that you can trust. Find one that you know the recipes work. The only way you're going to gain confidence in learning how to cook gluten-free is to have recipes that work out well. If you're not having luck with recipes, you're just going to get frustrated. I really like the America's Test Kitchen books 1 and 2. I find the recipes work for me, especially if it's something new I haven't tried before. They explain why it works. They have the ingredients and how they work and what they're good for, like rice flour and brown rice flour and sorghum flour. They tell you what starches work and how they work. Cornstarch, tapioca starch. They're important in the blends, which is why they add them to the big blends at the store. They tell you what they changed in their original recipe to make it work. Maybe they added some dry milk powder. They also have their own flour blend recipe in the cookbook. So I've made that blend, it works well for me as well. So invest in reputable cookbooks so you can have success when you start making new recipes that are gluten-free. Okay, so for the next couple tips, let's talk eating out at restaurants. It's challenging. You don't have control of the food and how it's prepared like you do at home. So it can be difficult. So let's go over some tips for when you're eating out. Tip number 7, find an app on your smartphone that will help you find gluten-free options. There's an app called Find Me Gluten-Free, which will help you find restaurants that you can safely eat at. There are also apps for your phone that will help you with products in the grocery store where you'll scan the barcode and it'll tell you if it's safe or not. One of those apps is called Shopwell Better Food Choices. Another one is the gluten-free scanner. Look at those apps and see if they might be a good fit for you. I'll link down below to where to get the app and you can check it out for yourself. But those are good resources to help you make informed choices when you're at the grocery store or at those restaurants that you want to eat at. Tip number 8, do your restaurant research. Get on the app, Find Me Gluten-Free, and look for your restaurant. Get on the website of the restaurant you're going to and look at their menu. Some restaurants are really good about marking gluten-free. Other restaurants are not. I can't tell you how many times in a restaurant I'm having to figure out what's in the meal option and we decide on if it's something that my wife should try or not. It makes it much easier if you do your research ahead of time. If you're going on vacation, search that area for restaurants and see where you can go to eat. Oftentimes, you're the only one gluten-free. And if that's the case, you don't want to feel like the problem. You want to have a good time and hang out with whoever you're with. So take a few minutes and do some research. Look at what your options are. Look at what's safe to have. Or maybe go to a restaurant that has better options that still fits for everyone. But do your research. Tip number 9, cross-contamination. Eating at restaurants is a cross-contamination disaster. Think about it. French fries don't have gluten in them, but all of a sudden, they get fried in the same oil as those chicken tenders. Now they're cross-contaminated and probably not safe for you to have, especially if you're celiac. So you have to understand that cross-contamination is something that can happen at a restaurant. Lots of restaurants have gluten-free options, but are not totally gluten-free, and they can't prevent cross-contamination. So you need to learn what you can eat and what you can't. Fried is usually a term that makes you think, what's it contaminated with? The French fries with the chicken tenders is a no-go. Tortilla chips in a Mexican restaurant could be fried with flour tortillas for chimichangas, and all of a sudden you can't have the chips. One tip on that, my wife brings her own tortilla chips to the restaurant. It's safe to have the salsa, it's safe for her to have the cheese dip, so she brings her own chips to the restaurant, and that way there she can enjoy her chips and salsa or her chips and queso without worrying about getting sick. Tip number 10 is to be your own advocate. You need to be okay, whether you're gluten intolerant or celiac, going into a restaurant and saying, what are my choices? Do you have a gluten-free menu? What's in that sauce that comes with this chicken dish? Ask those questions. If the server doesn't know, a lot of times they can go ask the kitchen. You need to make sure you're safe and that it's something you can eat. So you need to be okay with asking questions that you may find embarrassing or that you may feel that you're a problem. You're not a problem for those restaurants. You're there to enjoy dinner like everyone else. So be informed and be okay with asking the questions to keep yourself safe. Tip number 11 is more of a command. Don't panic. When we first started being gluten-free, and again, as I said earlier, we're a mixed household. My wife's gluten-free, I am not. It's like anything else. It's scary, it's stressful, it's irritating. You're learning a whole new way of eating, and you're not going to get it all on day one. So take it in baby steps, start slow, and learn what you can. Be okay with learning. Be okay when there's a mistake made. You're always learning with this. You're always finding what works, what doesn't. You're always trying new products. You're always trying new recipes. But don't panic. It is a process and it will take some time. There's still plenty of things that I continually look up to see if it's a new recipe that works, if it's a new product that we can try. Ultimately, I want food that tastes good. I don't care if it has gluten or not. I just want it to taste good. And that's what I want for my wife. If I can cook one dish that we both like and I don't notice it has gluten in it, then probably she's not going to notice it doesn't have gluten in it. Good food is good food. So don't panic as you learn how to start being gluten-free. Remember, you're a beginner, and at some point, you'll know, and it'll become second nature. You'll know restaurants that you can eat at. You'll know that brand X is one you can't have, but brand Y you can, and it's the same type of product. It takes time. Be okay with that, and you will succeed at being gluten-free. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing and giving me a like or leave me a comment on your struggles. I'd love to be able to try to help or offer some advice if I can. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.